think we all can agree that our culture isn't going to prepare us for death. And yet that's an inevitability that awaits all of us. And from the Lamrim point of view, the gradual stages of the path, the teaching on death has three levels of contemplation. The first one is the inevitability. And the fact that death is certain. And no matter how much our culture, family system, evolutionary instinct or habit wants to convince us to be in denial about it, from the gradual stages of the path training, it becomes essential at the outset of the path to include the reflection, the constant reminder that death is certain and inevitable. And in fact, it's not just in the Buddhist tradition, but recently in Greece, I was talking with somebody who was talking about a sacred monastery. I think it's on Mount Athos, where the monks there have either a room where there is a wall of skulls, and they go into that room and they meditate there. And they meditate and they reflect on the fact that one day their skull too will just be another brick in the wall there. For some of us, that might be a morbid contemplation, but from the point of view of the spiritual person who's committed to exercising agency over the course of evolution, it is a necessary prerequisite to galvanize one's attention and to press and to make a pressing effort at maximizing all the causes and conditions of the human life. So it is considered a motivating principle or motivating contemplation. How much time do we spend taking life for granted? How often are we lured by the Siren Song into a kind of haze, only to find that days, weeks, months, and years go by, and then we are rudely awoken with a diagnosis of cancer, or somebody else dies, and almost like rudely shooken from a stupor. So all the great yogis, even in the Ganges, on the banks at Varanasi, the Ghats, will find themselves, or when we were in Nepal and Pashupati, find themselves, and I remember keenly when Tiffany and Kanchi were leading us through Kirtan, I remember looking over, and a number of the pilgrims, we were on a bank, a sacred river, high above of the river, and on that river were the ghats, the stairs that lead into the sacred river, and on those banks were the pyres. And while the sound of the kirtan was happening, I noticed almost an attraction of the gaze of the pilgrims reflecting on the cremations that were occurring, almost like a gravitational pull. So that's the yogi opens their eyes. In a way, you can say that the spiritual path is about the end of denial. As we learned from our last course on trauma, the end of denial. So the first level of the Lamrim contemplation is that it's certain, it's not just somebody, it's going to happen to somebody else, it's going to happen to me, which is sobering. And I think there's a sub-contemplation we can think that we're not prepared, really. We're not well prepared. How many of you feel prepared for death? Raise your hand. One trooper among us. 4 years of college, did you ever take a class on death? I think universities have dispelled with all the essential ingredients that would make for a good life. Like we don't have any home ec anymore. We don't know how to cook for ourselves. There's no more art or music. There's certainly no death class. There's no class on meditation. So we're due for a complete revolution of our educational program. The first contemplation is on the inevitability of death. The second contemplation is that the time of death is uncertain. So that is another great contemplation, that even those of us that are healthy can turn a corner and die. Nobody is exempt, nobody's special, nobody's in the category where you have a hall pass. An older person can outlive a younger person. A healthier person can succumb to an illness, even though somebody hasn't lived, for example, a healthy lifestyle, hasn't had their vegan juices and all that. You can go out for a run, or your partner can go out for a run and not come back. Your kids can go to class and you might not see them. And it's a funny thing, the imagery of Odysseus, who's tied himself to the mast on his Odyssey because he wants to hear the Siren Song but not be lured into their gravitational pull. There is such a strong lure to become anesthetized to the facts that we have to collectively resist. But what would life be like if we didn't take it for granted? What would it be like? What would our interactions on a microscopic level be like if we didn't take for granted? What would every parting be like if we didn't take life or death for granted? If you didn't operate under the false assumption that you're definitely going to meet again, what would life be like? How would it shift your priorities? How would it shift your interactions? And then the final level of the contemplation, death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, death is inevitable, the time of death is uncertain. The third one is the only thing that you take with you, if you follow the paradigm of multi-life continuity, the only thing that you take with you is your experiences, that which you have been acculturate, that's what you have cultivated. You don't take your material possessions, you don't take your money, you don't take your fame, you don't take your status, you don't take your relationships. And if you think about it from the point of view of modern secular life, an entire life is devoted to those endeavors. And yet none of them go with you. If you start to evaluate your motivation in this life according to those standard and that paradigm, you can see from a Buddhist perspective just how absurd that life, what a waste of precious human life it is. They call these the 8 worldly winds. Most people live caught, ensnared in the current of the 8 worldly winds of chasing fame and avoiding blame, of chasing acquisition of wealth and avoiding the loss of it, praise and blame. Most of life is oriented towards that. And yet from a contemplative point of view, none of those things go with you. The only thing that goes with you is your virtue and vice, your wisdom or your blindness, the intangibles. The lessons not learned, or the lessons learned.